Hi, my name is Mark Simos, lead cybersecurity architect here at Microsoft, and we're going to be talking today about Zero Trust as a business driver. We're going to start off with a little bit about Zero Trust and the principles and kind of what it is, and then we're going to talk about how it supports business agility. And then after that, we're going to get into three key scenarios. Now, it's important to remember that Zero Trust has a lot of benefits and supports a lot of scenarios, but we're going to focus on three today and talk a little bit about them and show you some demonstrations of how those actually come to life with Microsoft capabilities. So secure remote and hybrid work is the first one. Identifying and protecting your most critical business assets is the second. And then building confidence in your security posture and program is the third. So Zero Trust itself is ultimately a very simple strategy at its core, which is to protect the things that are important to you, business assets, wherever they are. So we're no longer restricted to protecting things on the corporate network. Zero Trust is really about protecting things wherever they are and wherever they go. So the three key principles that underpin Zero Trust are assume breach or assume compromise. And this one really is a mindset shift from classic security thinking. And we're assuming that the attacker is going to take over an account or an identity or an endpoint or an application or an API. And then we're going to protect all of the assets accordingly. Verify explicitly is that we're not going to assume trust at all. We're going to explicitly verify trust. And then using least privilege access is really about limiting the blast radius so that in the event that one of those entities or identities, endpoints, et cetera, are compromised, that we're limiting the damage that they can do. And so the thing that we found about assume breach is it really shifts the mindset and the thinking of security from an inside-outside paradigm into more of a attack chain or kill chain or security graph type of thinking, where the attacker is navigating the various control relationships in your environment to get to the assets that they want. So it really is a mindset shift. Whereas Verify explicitly focuses heavily on the attack surface to protect any given thing against attack. And then least privilege is about if that does get compromised, how do we limit the blast radius, limit by time, limit by permissions of what can be accessed with that application, with that account, with that endpoint. Now, Zero Trust does have significant financial benefits, and Microsoft commissioned a study, had Forrester take a look at the total economic impact of Zero Trust, because we know it's the right thing to do from a security standpoint, but we need to be able to show that from a business standpoint to business leaders and CFOs and the like. And so that's really what that is there. So I'll let you read that on your own time. Now, what actually goes into Zero Trust? So Zero Trust is a fundamental transformation, and ultimately it is an end-to-end transformation. And it starts with access control, identity and network types of access control. But the same things that are driving that modernization of access control as we move to the cloud, as the attackers find their way inside the network, are also driving transformations in security operations, where you have to be able to detect threats inside and outside your environment. Infrastructure and development security, data security, IoT and OT security, as well as governance. And so we find that Zero Trust really spans across your entire program as well as your entire technical stack. And ultimately, we're going to focus today on three specific scenarios: supporting remote and hybrid work, identifying and protecting sensitive business data, and then building confidence in your security posture and program. So Nitika, do you want to start taking us through those?
Thank you, Mark. Hi, folks. My name is Nitika Gupta. I lead the product team that owns the IT admin tools for identity security. This includes conditional access, the Microsoft Zero Trust policy engine, multi-factor authentication capabilities, and identity security posture. I also co-lead the Zero Trust initiative in Microsoft. And today, I'm very excited to be talking to you. The first scenario that Mark talked about is secure remote and hybrid work. Zero Trust is not just a security mandate. It's an enabler for your business. These days, your employees expect flexibility. Your employees, like me, want to work from anywhere, anytime, and from any device. What that means for security professionals is that you now have to worry about a whole lot of scenarios and need to secure them. And combine that scenario matrix complexity with the attacks becoming more sophisticated and multifaceted, you have a lot on your plate. You also need to think about all the identities in your environment that you want to secure. Your employees accessing resources, you collaborating with your business partners, your vendors accessing resources, and your non-human identities. In the next few slides, I will specifically talk about secure remote and hybrid work for your employees. In your secure remote and hybrid work plan, you need to first think about securing new user onboarding. How do you explicitly verify that user before onboarding onto the account? And this is where every organization is different, and they have different workflows for identity verification and onboarding. Some organizations rely on Reporting Manager to provide the username and temporary password to the user. But then what happens in the world without passwords? Next, once you verify that user, you want to help them set up secure, strong credentials. And this is where not all credentials have the same strength. You want to adopt stronger credentials like FIDO2 security keys, Windows Hello for Business, and Microsoft Authenticator. Lastly, you want to help the user set up their device per the organization's policies. This is where your users will likely have a company-issued device when they start onboarding. But sometimes in the remote world, the device may not reach the user in time. And you need to have a plan for bring your own device. The options can be the user enrolling their device with the company or using a virtual desktop to access apps and be productive on their day one. Next, your user is onboarded and they're ready to be productive. The user will be accessing a wide range of apps to get work done. To prevent the user from having to remember multiple credentials or enter credentials per app, you want to invest in a centralized identity provider and set up single sign-on for all apps in your environment, including your on-premises apps. You want to eliminate any extra step for that user and ensure you're explicitly protecting access to the app. Now that you have the foundation with the central identity provider and the apps integrated, you're ready to apply the Zero Trust principles. You want to explicitly verify any access to the app based on all available data points. You want to require multi-factor authentication for all access. Ideally, you want to use phish-resistant MFA. Next, you want to also check the health of the device that the user is coming from. Now, I spoke a lot. Let's see a demo of how to enable secure remote and hybrid access.
In this demo, we'll be taking a look at the IT admin experience and creating workflows. In Woodgrove, we have a IT admin that needed to create a workflow for new user onboarding. If we select workflows, we can see that the IT admins has already created several workflows, and we'll be taking a look at onboarding a new employee. If we select onboard new hire employee, we can see that we could run it on demand, meaning that we can actively run this workflow for a specific user. Or we could have the workflow scheduled to trigger off the hire date. Now, if we select add users, we can go ahead and find the user that we want to onboard and run these tasks with. In our case, Deanna Smith. Now, when we select run workflow and select on Deanna Smith, we can see what exactly was ran when we selected her name and selected run workflow. We can see the status was completed, and the total tasks that were completed was 5. If we look here, we can see that the tasks were enable the user account, send a welcome email, run a custom extension, and generate a temporary access pass, sending an email to their manager, and adding that user to a Teams. Now keep in mind, if you're not familiar with custom tasks are, we can take a look at it now. But essentially, you can create your own business logic using logic apps within Azure. That way you don't have to go through several portals or add extra steps on a new user onboarding. So we select custom extensions, and if we look into the new employee onboarding logic app, we can see that it was successfully ran. And if we select on the actual run that happened just now, we can get further details on what exactly happened. We can see there was an HTTP request received, and we were able to call out ServiceNow. Now, if we look at it from a manager perspective, we can see the manager here received a new user onboarding email. And if we click on the actual link, we can see that not only was the user onboarded, enabled, and created a temporary access pass, but the user had their own ServiceNow ticket submitted. We also see that we got the temporary access pass for that specific user to be onboarded. Now, what it looks like from an end user perspective, instead of using the traditional username and password, Deanna Smith can now use a temporary access pass, so no longer username and password. By providing the username and password, she can enroll her device into passwordless authenticator app phone sign-in. So she doesn't need an actual password to get into her My Apps portal or sign into Azure AD integrated applications. Now, if we look at it from an end user perspective, again, she can go ahead and click sign in. And instead of providing username and password, she can just provide her email, click on next, where she gets prompted for a 2-digit code. Now, she has to match that 2-digit code, and notice that we also provide the user more information about the actual application and location of the request. Once Deanna Smith provides the 2-digit code and provides a biometric, if the device doesn't support biometrics, she could also provide a PIN. She's able to gain access to her My Apps portal. And from there, she can go to verified employee. Now, Woodgrove has also set up verified credentials. In this case, she needs to sign up for a verified ID for Woodgrove. She could easily do this by using the Authenticator app, where she could scan this QR code and get her verified credential.
All right, that was really cool. Next, let's talk about the second scenario, which is to identify and protect your business critical assets. At the end, it's all about the data. You're protecting access to the resources that have sensitive data. So in this scenario, we will talk about how to apply zero trust principles to your data pillar. It's a 4-step process. First and foremost, know your data. And once you know your data, you can start applying the zero trust principles of verifying explicitly and least privileged access to apply controls and protect your data. You further want to apply controls to prevent data loss and exfiltration. Lastly, using the principle of assume breach, you want to constantly monitor and govern your data. Before you act, you need to understand where the data resides. This is across your entire digital estate, across your hybrid and multi-cloud environment. Doing it manually won't scale, so you need an automated tool which can scan all the data sources, whether it be in Microsoft apps or non-Microsoft apps, like Hive Metastore, SAP, Oracle. And once you have scanned the data, you have a data map which will show you what are the sensitive information types in your organization. And where does that data reside in terms of location and application. From there, you can start scoping your problem and start strategizing on how to approach your deployment, going after the high-value targets. Now that you understand your data, you can start protecting it. Your users can manually classify your data as they're creating the content. However, you don't want to just rely on that. You want to set up your data protection tools to automatically label the data based on rules and machine learning. You can further enforce access policies to require stricter policies for more sensitive data. For example, you might require phish-resistant MFA for highly confidential data. Next, to prevent data leak, you want to set up policies that prevent oversharing, so the user doesn't accidentally share the data with an unintended audience. Also, set up access restrictions like do not download data on an unmanaged device, or block print, download, or copy-paste under certain conditions, like if the user account is risky. Using the principle of assume breach, you want to constantly monitor and refine your controls. Monitor for any gaps in your security coverage. Ensure any new sensitive data is still in scope of your controls. Investigate any cases where you suspect data exfiltration. Lastly, there might be unexpected sharing. You want to catch those early and address your policies. Enough of me talking. Let's see some of the data protection capabilities in action. And after the demo, we have Alicia, who will talk about the third scenario.
Next, we'll look at how IT admins inside of Woodgrove can identify and protect sensitive business data. Now, to do this, they're going to be using information protection. What they've already done is created a label for a classified project known as Project TNT. Now, what this means is they can actually create rules to identify what it means to be Project TNT, and if it's found, the automatic labeling policy that they can create can identify and automatically encrypt that specific data, preventing unauthorized access. Now, if the data resides outside of Azure, they can use Azure Purview. Here we can see that Woodgrove has deployed Azure Purview and is able to monitor and ensure that the data that gets collected in other resources, an example would be S3 inside of Amazon, gets scanned to ensure they understand what data is being stored. Now, what we mean by scanning is you can actually create specific rules to scan these other resources to ensure we're able to detect and classify specific data, such as company numbers, passport, social security, driver's license, and you can even create your own custom classification. If we go to classifications, we can see that we were able to identify other data to include government, financial, miscellaneous, and also personal. If we scroll down, we can get even further information on the type of data that was discovered to exist not only inside of Azure, but also AWS. IT admins inside of Woodgrove would also like to protect their on-prem applications, like this header-based app. When the user gains access to this application, they get prompted that they're being monitored with Defender for Cloud Apps. Now, what that lets the IT admins do is apply session controls, so that way they can control what's happening between the user and the actual application. So in the case that if a user tries to copy and paste, like in this example, we can prevent this from happening. Notice that the user's actions are blocked. These same session controls can also be applied to third-party applications. These same controls can be applied to, an example would be AWS. You can apply session controls to ensure that users don't accidentally download information from SaaS applications that should not be downloaded. In this example, not only are we providing the user the ability to select a role inside of AWS, but they'll get that same single sign-on experience while still being monitored through our CASB solution, which is Defender for Cloud Apps. In this case, if the user goes to S3 and tries to download customer data, in real time, we can not only detect, but we could also block that user from downloading this data. So this could have been done by mistake, but we're trying to keep that user safe from downloading information that they shouldn't have.
Hello, everyone. My name is Alicia Sanchez Teixeira, and I am a product manager at Microsoft. Now that we talked about the first scenario of supporting remote and hybrid work with some key actions like single sign-on and multi-factor authentication, plus the second scenario of identifying and protecting your critical business assets and identities with key actions like applying sensitivity labels, data encryption, and data loss prevention policies, now we can bring this all together by discussing how we can bring governance and optimize all these key actions and build confidence in your security posture and programs. By implementing a modern security strategy like Zero Trust, gives you visibility across multiple endpoints. This can be corporate managed devices, personal devices, or unidentified IoT devices, which are accessing corporate resources, and you can incorporate access decisions to those endpoints based on risk assessment of those endpoints and automated detection and response actions based on an alert an endpoint may trigger. So you can enable comprehensive security monitoring, risk-based access controls, and policy throughout your security infrastructure to focus on protecting critical assets and data in real time within a dynamic threat environment. Next, we need to optimize and re-optimize. Microsoft Secure Score and Microsoft Purview Compliance Manager are the assessment tools to measure the security posture of your assets across identities, devices, apps, and data, and measure against industry benchmarks and best practices. It can help reduce risk around data protection and regulatory standards. Your security team can continuously monitor your secure score to understand current risk and vulnerable assets. With this measurable data, you can add these scores to your regular reporting and security KPIs and demonstrate your progress. Next, posture is all about prevention. By improving your posture, you're preventing high risk and vulnerabilities. It is very important to continuously observe and monitor your assets across various attack vectors, detecting potential and actual leaks and pressure points that threaten your sensitive data flow. By analyzing these observations and patterns, it can actually help you to derive risk and insights and reduce the likelihood of a major breach. With continuous analytics and tracking, you can determine the right level of access controls in real time and balance your user experience with proper governance. By analyzing the security signals, you can evaluate your security culture and identify areas for improvement. Finally, help boost your security team's confidence by improving your security posture. A zero-trust approach enables your security team to simplify their cybersecurity strategy and retire unnecessary legacy solutions. Now that I've spoken to you about building confidence in your security posture and programs using a zero-trust approach, I will hand off to Mark to talk to you more about the CISO workshop.
Thanks, Alicia. So the CISO workshop is one of the ways that we make zero trust real. So the CISO workshop is actually a complete workshop for CISOs, no surprise, as well as other folks that own a part of or influence the program and strategy of the organization. And this workshop actually applies zero trust throughout the entire program. And it really starts from all of those business drivers and those technical and security drivers. Talks about roles and responsibilities, how those change. It talks through how to align to business priorities and business risk, how to engage with business leaders in a productive, helpful way. And it's got maturity models built in that reflect the practical journeys that our customers actually take as they kind of go from just starting at security all the way to a really robust, mature program that's working through all the problems and keeping up with all the challenges of today. We go through all the different program components, access control, security operations, asset protection, governance, innovation security, and DevSecOps. So ultimately, a very complete view of security from that program and strategy perspective. And that is available not only as free public videos, about 4 hours worth of videos, 16 videos in total, but also as an engagement where you can bring some Microsoft folks on site or virtually in today's world, to have a discussion and do some planning with your teams. And so engage your CSAM or customer success account manager for more information on that. We also have the Zero Trust website that is our main repository for all things Zero Trust and help you kind of get up to speed on all those elements to it. And then we've also included various different blog series that you can check out and understand how to apply Zero Trust, as we identify new topic areas. And with that, thank you for your time and encourage you to get started on this journey. It is well worth it and very rewarding. Thank you.